Okay, good morning everyone. We're going to call the meeting to order at 9:31 this morning. So is there any additions to the agenda from administration? Nothing? No. Okay, anything from council? Okay, oh, there's lots. Bruce?
I'll make a motion that council adopts the agenda as presented.
Okay. All in favor? That's carried. And we'll move on to all the way down, I guess, to 7.1. Oh, 4.1, sorry. Adoption of the previous minutes. There's none in there. It's none there. Okay, so we will go down to 7.1. Council remuneration policy.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I sent you an email on this, I didn't feel right just making administrative changes to the policy that determines your compensation. I thought, even though you've given me the authority administratively to make those changes, it's probably better from a transparency point of view that you actively consider it. There is no structural changes to this policy of any major significance. The biggest significant change, I would say, is you no longer require the reeve or the deputy reeve to sign the expense claims. It's any one of council can sign for another one. You're all fiscally responsible individuals and hold yourself to account through your code of conduct bylaw and other aspects. So that way, with your busy non-council lives, if one of you is unavailable, you can always see another one a little bit more freely. So it streamlines it that way. Just clarifies some definitions, updates or new formatting. But overall, there isn't anything, I would say, of substance in the changes. The costs are exactly the same. The rates are unchanged. In the event that administration gets a cost of living increase, these rates will be adjusted accordingly, just as the old policy. And then based on that, we're requesting that you rescind the old policy and adopt the new policy as it's presented.
Okay, thank you. Is there any questions on this? Councilor Dean?
Through the chair to admin, just a question about the effective date. It says 2012. Would it not be today?
Yes, so luckily through the chair, the document is the draft, and we were working off of an old template, and that will be inserted with the date that once it's adopted. You're correct.
Okay.
That was your question too? Okay, any other questions? Councilor Bowen?
Through the chair to administration, I just wanted, I looked through it and I couldn't find it, but where does it reference that the rates would only change based on a COLA adjustment?
Yeah, absolutely. I can find it. Cost. Uh, 1D. Honorariums are adjusted annually based on the cost and living increase applied to county staff and rounded to the nearest dollar.
Thank you. I'll skip right over.
Councilor Westridge?
I'll make a motion that council rescind policy 1019, council remuneration.
Thank you, Councilor. Any questions on that motion? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And then 7.2, appointments to.
No.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, I'll make a motion that council adopt the council remuneration policy G 1.006 as presented.
Sorry, I didn't see that. I'll accept that. Thank you. Any questions on that? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Now we'll go to 7.2, appointments to committees and external boards.
Thank you. As part of our overall review of our policies, we reviewed the 1017 family members on boards and committees policy. It was adopted in 2016. The purpose, to my understanding, was to provide guidance to council for appointing members at large while managing any perceptions of bias or favoritism with family restrictions. However, it didn't fully speak to that. As part of the review, we thought it would be appropriate to expand the policy to just clarify better committees and external boards and how we adopt those people and the integrity expectations of them. We also noticed some conflicts within the current policy. It says you have to be a resident of Woodlands County. We currently have board members that are not residents of Woodlands County, so we were violating that as well. So we've put in the ability for council to waive that requirement. It is a requirement unless waived by council. We've provided some more clarity on definitions, how you select, what we do for conflicts, council's roles, and we've also linked it back to code of conduct expectations for our board members. Our hope is that now with this established, whenever we hire, when we're reviewing candidates to put on our boards, we can provide them this, and we can also let them know that this is how they were selected based on the criteria to ensure that there is no conflict and that we declare it where there is.
Thank you. Any question on any of that? Councilor Dean?
No question, just was going to move that council rescinds policy 1017, family members on boards and committees.
Thank you. Any questions on that motion? Seeing none, call the question, all in favor? That's carried. There's two here. We get second motion. Who wants to make it? Councilor Dean?
Yeah, I can do that. Move that council adopts policy G1.007 or 007. Appointments to committees and external boards, selection and integrity policy as presented.
Thank you, Councilor. Any questions on that motion? Seeing none, call the question, all in favor? And that's carried. So, we'll go down to council reports and inquiries. What do you want to start? Anyone ready yet? Councilor Passage?
Through the chair. I had a protective services meeting. And all the stats are pretty much the same. They haven't changed much. They have a new program. It's mainly the town right now, but it's gonna get expanded to the county. It's, if you're a business owner and if the RCMP are driving by and they see somebody in your shop, you can sign up to this and it gives the RCMP permission to go in the building without having to wait for the owner of the building to come. So it'll speed things up and it's totally voluntary. They're just working on it to get it through the town right now. And it is coming to the county, so Joan, you're probably gonna hear about it. So it's a good thing. And was at the Global Energy Show in Calgary. As we discussed earlier, it's sure downsized from what it was like in early 90s, late 80s. It's, I'd say, a quarter of what it used to be. But it was still very informative. The opening speaker was the Secretary General of OPEC. And the interesting thing that he said, oil and gas has not peaked, and from what he can see, or OPEC can see, it's not gonna peak for a very long time. I don't know where he got his numbers from, but the population of the earth right now is 8 billion. And within 2 years, they estimate another 5 billion people. So most of those are in developing countries which are really in need of energy. So natural gas is the big one. So that's why he's saying it's not gonna. I think the only reason our government is saying oil and gas has peaked in Canada is because of off. And, so that's a good thing for us. We had, a speaker, he used to be can't remember his name, and I forgot my phone, so it's not, I don't have it. He was an MLA or a minister for Alberta, Ken Hughes, that's who it was. He owns Beacon Data Centers right now. And what the conversation was about was who is gonna get data centers, and basically it's whoever can supply power, electricity, will get the data centers. He said the big players like Google and Meta, they will build a data center to how much power you have. They're looking at data centers that draw as much electricity as the city of Edmonton or Calgary do. And it's just unlimited. And the interesting thing was there's gonna be all the work building the data centers and running them and everything. But he said what's more important is the work that's coming dealing with the data. With people that are gonna be hired for that. So that's a really good thing. And to sum it up, the big thing is if our government doesn't do something, rescind or change Bill C-69 and C-48, that's the tanker ban. And they say if they don't do something, there's no sense expanding our oil and gas right now, because you're not gonna have no place to send it. So that's the gist of that.
Thank you. Any questions or? Okay. Bruce?
Yeah, 2 events for me. On the 5th, I went on the road tour, which is, as I've always said, the first thing you see in the morning when you get up and the last thing you see when you go home. So it was good to see that we've got a bit of a path forward on the subdivision roads, and that we're talking about bases and drainage and that kind of thing, so I'm happy about that. I've had a few roads pointed out to me since then, and we did see them on the tour, so it's good we had information on them. The other thing I did on the 16th, 2 days ago, I had, there was a town hall that RMA put on Bill 49 and the police funding model and the Alberta Provincial Police Force possibly. So we're not sure where the police funding model is going. They've stalled it out again, but we know it's probably going to go up between 30 and 50% next year. So when we're budgeting, whoever's around budgeting can be aware of that. As far as the provincial police boards are concerned, they've put some of the legislation in place and said they're going to create the boards. I'm actually supposed to be sitting on one, but we've done all the applications and haven't heard anything back yet on when or anything on those boards. So since Bruce had mentioned the data center question, I got an interesting question, and I guess this kind of takes us back to when the marijuana greenhouses were going up. You know, we kind of thought that that would be a commercial development type of thing, and then they said, no, it's agriculture, and there's no assessment there for it. We've never assessed, province has never assessed a data center before. So the real value in this thing is going to be in the building and the servers, but they switch out about every 4 years on a running cycle on the equipment. So is some of this going to come in through some type of M&E, machinery and equipment, or are they just doing the shell or whatever? So it's going to be a question. So that's something that RMA's gonna have a look at as well. And other than that, that's it for me.
Councilor Rowland?
The chair to council admin, I guess, just to add on to Councilor Burrow's comment about the police funding model, at the NAIL conference just recently, I can't remember what the source was, but they were, the number they were floating out was 53% increase. I know they did have the Minister for Municipal Affairs as part of that conference this time around. The number probably didn't come from him, but they were chatting about that percentage increase during that conference. So it's, you know, it's pretty significant increase. It's kind of crazy.
Any other questions? Councilor Dean?
Yeah, thanks. So June 5th, as Councillor Burrows had mentioned, there were 4 of us that attended that road tour. And as John mentioned, you know, the fact that there's kind of a plan in place for subdivision brings some certainty when it comes to budgeting. And, you know, the plan going forward seems to make a lot of sense. And the road tour took us through some of those subdivisions that were going to be repaired. Also talked about upcoming projects and some issues that, like road issues, sloughing and whatnot, that you hear about it and you know it's there, but when you see it and you see the scope, it makes it just makes it real. And again, once it comes to budgeting and whatnot, that those priorities emerge pretty quickly. And then on the 10th through the 12th, along with Councillor Prestige and Wilhelm, I was at the Global Energy Show as well. And, you know, I think Bruce captured pretty much the theme. And the other theme that I heard consistently through any government ministry, ministries that were interviewed by Lansbridge, she was the moderator. So as those folks came through, you know, they invariably were asked, you know, what about our current federal government, federal leader? You know, is there optimism? And you know, they regard it as cautious optimism. And those 2 bills that Bruce spoke to, I mean, that's, you know, our provincial representatives have been sending that message since they were enacted, since before they were enacted. And it's really fundamental to Alberta's economy that those bills are adjusted or amended or changed so that we can increase our production. The no emissions bill, I'm not sure what number that is, but as Danielle Smith keeps saying, no emissions, no production. And the other one, the greenwashing bill, you know, when you get behind the philosophy behind the language in that bill, it's a slippery slope, I think, in terms of our democracy and how those people, if they have the means, you know, they can pass legislation that is that most people would say doesn't make any sense at all. So hopefully that pendulum is starting to shift backwards. And then last Saturday, the Athabasca Watershed Council held their AGM here at the Legion in Whitecourt. So there was a pretty good turnout of board members and staff members and a number of people online. And last meeting I reported to you that I wasn't really sure of how the funding flowed through that organization. And so, you know, we got the financial statements, and they, you know, they had revenues of $700,000, and it was a mixture of donations as well as their staff members are all there on assignment. So, you know, they do a riparian study and they'll put a case forward to the various levels of government and get funded for it. You know, the project gets approved, and along with the approval is that, you know, we'll fund somebody to go out and do the work. So they've got a pretty extensive program in a variety of aspects that are looking at all kinds of things within the watershed. So I was impressed. It was a good organization and a good meeting. And that's it.
Thank you. Any questions for Councilor Coon?
Yeah, it's just a question through the chair to Councilor Dean. As far as in the watershed part what is the participation from industry there? Is there a fairly high level?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, there was representatives from forest industry, and in fact, the chair is Dan Moore, and he's,
Oh, okay.
he's president of Alberta
Yeah.
Forest Products Association. Mining was represented, and oil and gas, and sorry, I don't have those the names of those people, but yeah, there was representatives, and they sit as board members. So the board is comprised of municipalities, volunteers, as well as these industry partners, so.
And just a follow-up for me for that one, again, is that one of the biggest, I would say, people that should be concerned about watershed is the agriculture industry, and I was just curious if there was anybody from agriculture there. Because if there's not, there's a place that we gotta do some work.
No, I don't, and forgive me if I'm wrong about this, but I do not believe agriculture is represented with a board seat. But agriculture is unquestionably a major focus of the group, especially with riparian and grazing down to tributaries, etc. So there was a grant program, in fact, available to producers to, instead of letting their cattle go and drink out of the tributary, that it was up to $10,000 grant that would supply a pump and troughs and whatnot to move the water up into a dugout or a trough. So yeah, there's and from what I understand, when those conversations take place between the organization and that respective producer, it's been very well received. So
It's actually interesting you said that about the grant. I was just talking to a person not that long ago that was kind of raving about a grant he received to do exactly that.
sure.
Way better for his cattle. Nothing's getting stuck in a creek or anything like that. And bring it to a water bowl. And I think he got 2 or 3 done on the one grant, and he was quite pleased about it. So
Yeah.
it was
Yeah, so
It
that's
makes total sense.
a real life example of the work that they can do.
yeah.
When you see the pictures of how the banks are sloughing in, and everybody's seen the cattle tracks and whatnot, and then you see it 2 years later, it looks entirely different.
It repairs itself pretty quickly if you
It
can
does,
keep them
yeah.
off.
And they plant, they put willows and various other things.
Yeah. Good program. Any other questions? Councilor Willem?
Yeah, okay, so I was also at the Global Energy Show with the other 2 counselors. They kind of covered everything, other than something I'm going to bring to the Economic Development Committee, which will probably trickle back up to council at some point, is so they're one of the big sponsors of many of the talks at the conference was CRIN, they're the Clean Resource Innovation Network. They're a nonprofit group that gets $100 million in federal funding every year to fund innovative research in industry, so not just oil and gas, but all industry. They have 5,300 members Canada-wide already within their group, and last year they funded $80 million worth of projects. Their main thing is connecting innovators with end users so end users need a solution, these innovators come up with a solution, CRIN provides funding to get these solutions from their development phase into testing phase to bring to market. So in discussion with them, I looked at a summary of kind of what's all involved in what they do, and it's basically just a connection network. So membership is free in that group, and they're looking to announce in September another $100 million in federal funding for this innovation research. There are no municipalities participating at this moment. So what I would like to do, and what I'll bring to the ACDev group for this discussion, is getting Woodlands to be part of it, and only in that we would market our region as a place where these innovative technologies could be tested, or end users might need a site selection for bringing one of these new products in. So with no municipalities in there, I'd like Woodlands to be one of the first, and it costs us nothing, and all it does is just a connection network that with significant federal funding that we could potentially bring new businesses or new industries into our region. So other than that, I don't have anything else.
Any questions on that? Councillor Kukin?
Yeah, I attended the spring road tour as well, and there was a couple of things that were really brought to my attention during that process, and that is that first of all, on the east side of the county, which I represent, we don't have the issues that we have over here because of the amount of traffic that's on these subdivision roads. And we have an incredibly good road network over there that's managed very well. And so I think it's a responsibility on our part as councillors to actually let our residents there know that a lot of the resources that are deployed here are for need, not because Whitecourt has more of a political presence in the boardroom. I think that that was evidenced really well by the way administration put together that road tour, where they're starting to really build out this whole asset management strategy that was started by council before we were there, and really nothing was done with it until the last year. And I think that for the conversations I've had with John and Bruce and the other councillors over here, is the frustration has always been that we've not really addressed the issues over here. It was just symptom management, and that was already a question that was being asked 6 or 7 years ago. And so we really need to let our residents know that through the persistence of the old board and the new board, and now with our new administration, we're actually getting somewhere with these issues. And I know with the conversations that I have with the residents over in our area, I always tell them that we don't have the traffic, we don't have those situations that were created over there, and it's our responsibility as a council to address the needs where they're supposed to be. And so, kudos to Jeff and to administration for putting together probably the first road tour in all the years that I've been on this council that were meaningful. So, and then the only other thing I got to do is I got to present the Ag Society, Topland Hall, the Fort Assiniboine Music or Cultural Guild, and there's one more. Moms and Tots, their grants from Community Services, and had an opportunity to have a really good conversation with those people. They're really good community people that are constantly trying to make this community a better place. And so it was nice to just be able to sit here and say thank you. And that's it.
Any questions? Councillor Wall?
Just to build off the comment that Peter said, like when you're talking to your residents and you say, they think that a lot of decisions are weighted on because we live around Whitecourt, but I'm glad that you communicate to them. Like we have some unpaved gravel roads that have more residents, like a single unpaved gravel road that have more residents down it than the combined population of Blue Ridge and Fort Assiniboine put together. And I mean, it's not that means anything that needs to push any decision making, but that's why needs to come over here, because a significant amount of our population lives over here. So just wanted to add on to that.
Yeah, I've had a few conversations with residents about that too, because they say, like, look how many houses this one road funnels down to, and the amount of houses is like 10. Where over here there's some
90.
high density population. So once you do explain that, then it makes a lot more sense, because the feel a lot of times on that side of the county is that we're not getting they're paving roads and they're cold mixing and doing all this stuff, and we're not, but the usage of the road, and it's not getting pounded out quite like some of the ones over here. So yeah, definitely those same conversations.
Well, I think as well is that there's a lack of that understanding. And the positive side of it is that why are we complaining? Because we have really good roads over there. Like we really don't have anything to complain about. So,
I just took a drive down some county roads, not in our municipality, but and I was happy to come home. Some better roads than this way, but any other questions? Nope. I was just gonna bring up two things. This is kind of questions maybe for administration. But the Egg Society in Fort Assiniboine, they were looking at purchasing some cold mix. So there might be an ask to council or to the county, sorry, about possibly getting the infrastructure people or getting a quote on what they would charge to lay it if they purchase the cold mix. So I just said I'd mention it here and give a heads up that might be coming. And then there's another one. I didn't really know how to direct the person who called. It was just one, but they were concerned about approaches, and they're just approaches to nothing, like old cut block approaches, or just to no, like not even to a road of any kind. It's just an approach off a county road. And what they're finding is lots of people are camping in them or parking there, and they're leaving huge messes behind. So they use the approach to get off the road, and then it's just a little clearing, no bigger than this room, and they find themselves cleaning up a lot of junk all the time there. So he asked me if the county would remove approaches. He said it's probably nicer to push snow and not have to lift their wing and stuff all the time for these useless approaches. So I guess maybe just a question is, do we keep those for any reason, or would that be something that we would remove?
Through the chair of council, we generally don't receive this kind of request, but I would not be, I'll be willing to receive that request and respond that way. Generally, approaches are put in by the developer. People are entitled to putting a second approach, and there's a cost sharing formula that if it's approved. If they no longer need approach, I'll be willing to take a look at their request.
Just to clarify, sorry, I kind of probably said it confusing. Their approaches on Crown land, so it's not actually on deeded property. It's just a Crown land, so then people are just camping kind of in there, and it's probably good for places to camp, but they're leaving lots of messes, so that was the concern.
I'll be willing to receive their request so I can take a deeper look into this specific situation.
He told me about them, so I can bring it offline and explain some of it after the meeting.
If he can send a written request to us.
Okay, thank you. So that was the only two things I was gonna bring up, so any questions there? Okay, if I can get a motion to accept council reports? Councilor Kunkin?
I'll move that we accept the council's reports as presented.
Thank you. Any questions on that motion? None, all in favor? That's carried. Okay, now go down to corporate services, 11E1.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So a complaint was received by the administration here from two of our residents about an increase on the property taxes due to minimum tax being applied across multiple parcels tied to the grazing leases. And I would just like to inform council that all these requests came via phone calls, and there's been no formal complaints to us, but we just wanted to have that discussion coming up. Because 30th June is approaching, which is our due date for taxes, and if at all there are other complaints at that point, we'll bring it back to council. But so far, we only have those two complaining. Now, one other thing I also wanted to bring to the attention of council is we have a total of 179 Crown grazing leases that are currently active in the county, and each lease having at least one parcel. So I did bring up something. I think I did attach those to the package there, and you'd see one thing that I noticed there is the largest Crown leasing lease the biggest has 59 parcels, and of course, looking at the math from minimum tax $50, that's just about 2,900. So in total, we have about 684 parcels paying a minimum tax, of course, if you do the math, they again about 34,000. So no official complaint has come through, and we're just waiting to see at the end of the tax season if we'll get more complaints or this will just die down. So we just started to bring it to council just for information for any future complaints that might come through. And I did, that particular individual that complained, I think I've also attached the map as well, so that you see exactly where those parcels are. But I've also put 2 maps there to show council the distribution of the grazing leases all over the county. They're distributed, some to the east, some to the west. And I just open the floor for discussion, council.
Thank you. Councilor Dean?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. So to administration and council, first of all, I just want to address the statement that there was no official request, and that's correct. But as you mentioned, considering the time sensitivity on this, I think phone calls to our elected officials and to our CEO, that they're not in a written form, but I think they convey the same message and need to be dealt with some urgency. So I don't know about the rest of council, but I didn't consider that there were certain grazing leaseholders that had the volume of leases that they have. And when you look at the relative value, the assessed value, and they're assessed as ag land, so the assessment is low. So you might make an argument that they're still getting really good value. This is still new. It's new to them. It's new to us. I did not anticipate that somebody might have 59 leases. And when you do the math based on a resident who brought the concern to me, it's about a 2.5 time increase. So if they were paying, $500 before, now they're paying $1,500. If they were paying $1,000, now they're paying $2,500. So those costs, because they weren't aware the change was coming, they didn't put that into any budget, and I'm not certain that that's fair to do to our producers. So I would be in favor, considering how much money this is bringing into our budget. It's on the order of $20,000 to $25,000. It's not going to significantly impact our operations if we either reduced this or eliminated it entirely and said, hey, this is coming for next year. Be prepared for next year. But I'd be in favor of not charging the increase this year. But I'll open it up for discussion.
Councilor Kukan?
Yeah, and I think, I through the chair to administration, I'd like to add to that. I actually had conversations with three different leaseholders in my area that were very surprised at that, and for a number of reasons. First of all, I think, I would accept that I didn't research that personally enough myself as a counselor when we were talking about it before, because I didn't even understand that parcels had a tenth of an acre or whatever that was getting the minimum charge. And there's a number of other issues that I don't think we've researched and that these leaseholders are going to face that are going to be significant costs to them in the future. And it's happened in our area. And that is that as the forest harvesting gets into those zones, they will be required not to be able to use those leases through that time frame. And we're still going to be taxing them for that. It's happened before. And it took the landowners that did deal with that 3 or 4 years to get compensation from the forest companies before they were able to use that property again. So they had significant losses, far more than what because a lease that has 20 quarters on it has $100,000 worth of fencing on it, and really then all of a sudden the forest company comes in and you you can't even use that investment and we're still taxing them. So I think that it serves a purpose for us to have a robust conversation of how we would implement something like this, because I don't disagree that there is some value there and that we have to basically recover the costs that, you know, we have to have for administrating that. But I would concur with Councillor Dean. I don't think that we should be implementing that tax at this time yet.
Councilor Rose?
Yeah, thanks, through the chair, thanks for Councillor Hogan and Councillor Dean's comments. I think you guys summed it up fairly well. And I've been doing this long enough that I should have considered when we took this under, because it was so close to when the taxes were due for the tax notices, that we took the step of saying, okay, we're gonna put this in place for next year, but we're gonna send out the tax notices like they would be in the model for next year, and then you can get some feedback on them. So and that's, if I had to do it over again, that's what I would have done, but hindsight's always 20/20. But yeah, I'm seeing a lot of people that are impacted in a negative way on this one, so.
Any other questions?
I just have some, if I could, to the chair. So I've heard a bunch of comments and we've had some discussions on it too. So just for clarity, is the idea that, is the bigger concern the people with multiple, for example, the 59 parcels with 9,000 acres? It's because some of those may be 0.01 of an acre that you feel that it's unfair. But to play the devil's advocate, does that still apply to the person that has 0.01 of an acre that they own, that is titled, or is just farmland that's not leased? Are you saying they're different than people on the leases? And I also, I have to push back in the best interest of the county. Will the $30,000 break us as an organization? No. But ensuring that everyone pays an equitable share, and removing it entirely, I would say, isn't necessarily equitable either. If the concern is grazing leases with multiple people, maybe the alternative, and my recommendation is you keep it, but that's just a recommendation and you take it how you like. An alternative that isn't in the item is maybe for those 179 grazing leases, you adjust it so that it's a minimum tax of $50 per grazing lease. That way those 179 properties, whether it's a 5-acre lease or a 9,000 acre lease, is only $50. But they are getting a service level that, I'm sorry, at our current mill rate with the way agriculture land is regulated in the province, they're not paying for the services that are available to them should they need them. They are unable to get their products to market if these are agricultural leases, and I'm gonna make that assumption based on the assessment, even though some of them are full bush quarters and they're probably recreational and the tax is different. But even that $50 is more of an equitable share than the $1.50 invoice that they would get alternatively. To make that adjustment also, if you do go it as the way some of you are suggesting, we are sending out invoices that cost less than the postage we are sending them out on, plus the staff time to redo. And I get the ownership, and that was on me too for not explaining that it would apply to grazing leases. But if you are going to lean that way, which I wouldn't recommend, but it's your choice, still making them pay the minimum $50 for their whole lease group as a whole, and directing us to come up with a policy or something for next year to kind of iron that out and put in some exclusions. I do know some municipalities that have put in those exclusions. They become administratively burdensome. It's possible. I wouldn't recommend you go that way, but it is possible. It just takes a lot of time, and I've seen assessment departments with 3 assessors in-house and 2 clerks struggle to do it, and we have a tax and assessment department of 1 and 2 contractors. And so there's some plus and cons to it. But those are the 2 biggest issues I wanted to be clear is it only the grazing leases, or is it all minimum taxes across the board? And if you are going to look at reducing it, I would still recommend that you look at something just focused on the number of leases rather than a complete reduction.
Councilor Bean?
Through the chair to our CEO, a couple questions around that. So, am I correct in assuming that some of these leaseholders that have, 20 different leases, they're paying, let's say they cumulatively, they're paying $250, $300.
Yep.
Are you suggesting that council then would reduce them from 250 down to 50?
Well, so you're sorry. I'm saying through the chair that with the minimum tax in our if you have, so let's say for the $250 one, they have 5 quarters. Let's just say that bill, if it's all on one lease, would now go to $50. That 9,000 acre one, which is 59 separate parcels, it's clearly not 150 acres on each of those parcels. That bill it would go down from the 2,000 something to $50. I don't think that's necessarily equitable, but it would address the concern that council has of you're saying you didn't recognize that these grazing leases had multiple properties, and when you made that, it was a failure of administration to clarify that for you. I think that's a compromise. I wouldn't recommend in the first year you implement a minimum tax, you say one group is exempt and another isn't. That defeats the entire point.
Okay, so my second question related to that is, I can only speak for myself, but I think I understand what you're saying, but I'd like to see it laid out, and I'd like to have the opportunity to discuss it and compare it to other similarly zoned lands, and come up with a rationale that is fair and makes sense. And I don't think we're at that point right now, and I would suggest we just rescind this idea. And as Councilor Burrows had mentioned, you put this into budget discussions for next year and have a good, robust discussion on what you want to do with it.
I was gonna add something, maybe this isn't a very popular opinion, but I've had some conversations in the past with producers that are looking for grazing leases, and they can't find them, and I feel like a lot would be very happy to pay that amount, and if they were able to get one, you know what I mean? Like, I get it, for the ones that are paying it, you get an unexpected rate increase. That's never nice to see when you open that letter up. But the flip side is, like, there's a lot of producers that if they could get 59 parcels and 9,000 acres for $2,950 would be like over the moon happy for that much land at that rate. And I think I would never want to go to that $50 per parcel and lower this down, because that would be I don't think that would be very good with the ones that don't have it. So you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, because they are getting a lot of value for not a lot of money. The rate increase, not very timely, not very much notification, that's not great either. So I see both sides. Councilor Clinton?
Well, through the chair, and this is for general information. First of all, the cost of those leases, the last one that I seen sold, I think was 4 or 5 quarters, and the the purchase price of that was over $100,000. The second thing was each parcel had a $3,500 transfer fee. So anybody that thinks that they're gonna get a grazing lease for just the $2,950 is not in the real world either. As far as I'm concerned, if you do the costing out on these grazing leases now, and I know of people who have some, there is no return there. It's just a place that you basically background your animals. There is no real positive return at the end of the day. Because of the investment, it's no different than farmland at $600,000 a quarter. If you're only allowed 10 animal units per section of that lease, it's questionable whether it's even viable. So there's that whole economics discussion that, you know, we're not really needing to be in. I think we need to be in the discussion of what is it that we really want to see as helping our administration address the issue of figuring out how we're going to cost effectively, implement the taxes on that property.
Through the chair, so I had a slightly different viewpoint on this. I don't agree with taking this away. These grazing leases for a significant amount of time have had what essentially is incredibly low taxes for a service level that nobody else is getting within our municipality. I want to use an example. I won't say the resident's name, but some resident, and I'm sure in some other areas this has happened, but we've had a few residents whose tax bill has increased 3,000% just because of a change of assessment. And we're not going to those residents and saying, well, you know, it's short notice that your assessments changed, so we're going to defer your tax increase for 1 year because it's sudden and unexpected. And, you know, we're looking constantly on how to generate more revenue from our municipality in a fair way. And I think it's more than fair that we've implemented this. I mean, this came to council and we all agreed we're going to do it. And what the time frame or not, we had our chance to discuss it and not approve it for this year previously. Why are we going back on it now? I don't agree with that. I mean, tax rates change, assessments change, people's tax rates go up. We're trying to recover costs at a very minimum on some of this stuff. And we've asked administration to do that, and that's what they're doing here. Why are we taking this back now? I don't agree with it.
Councilor Dean first, and then Councilor.
Through the chair, to respond to Councillor Wilhelm, an assessment increase as deemed by a third party, our assessors, in effect adds value to the asset that owner has. There's no increase in asset value here. This is just a new tax. And with respect to the opportunity to revisit it, I think that's our job. I think it's our job to listen to our residents and understand that sometimes when we make decisions, we didn't consider certain things. And I know for sure I did not consider this. I think you're 100% right that we need to come up with a system that's fair and works. But in my opinion, this one's just, we're a little ahead of the curve on this. We haven't thought this one out.
Councilor Coogan?
Yeah, you know, I understand what Councilor Wilhelm's saying as well. The interesting part about this is that we're talking, you know, of regulated assessment, which is what this land would be, unregulated, which is what private ownership of non-ag land would be. So you can't really compare those two. And the second one is that, you know, and this is a part of the irresponsibility, I guess, that we have to accept as individuals who were looking at this in the first place, is that we didn't delve into all of the information. And so we made a decision with not all the information, and that's on us. And so I don't disagree with going back and accepting that as our responsibility to review with the consideration that we understand that administration has some issues with doing this, and we want to at least figure out how we can have a cost recovery plus fairly give the rest of the residents of our county the understanding that we are looking at level of service and all of these things. A lot of these quarters, like I know one grazing lease that there is absolutely no access to, so there's no service applied. And because the animals run off of that, right off of his property into the grazing lease, so there's no level of service at all. CAO Ferris has brought up the fact that, yeah, they're still bringing their animals to market on a road system that they use. And so this is a more complex discussion than what we initially engaged in.
Just one point of clarity that John said, Mr. Orwa, Devin, and thank you, formally met him because you were away at the last meeting, and I think it was a strong statement that's kind of also went over everyone's head in the discussion is taxes are due relatively soon. The Interpretations Act says mail is deemed delivered within 5 days of it being sent. So let's assume you make a decision today. 5 days puts it onto the 24th roughly, maybe 25th. You then have those people to look at their taxes, accept their discount, and then submit it on the 26th, 27th. We're probably coming to very easily a deadline over the due date. That being said, most times we will accept tax notices as long as they've been post dated. But in all reality, it's 1 week away. Regardless of what you decide, and administratively, our recommendation is you don't change it. If you do decide to change it, however the motion ends up being, my recommendation is not that you adjust this year. It's that you potentially provide a credit. Whatever the number is, we can do it on the back end and do credits rather than resending out notices with adjusted rates. We're also saving those costs as well. I don't think it may not make some of the constituents you're talking to happy, but it's saying, hey, we got 8 days, really, 9 days between our due date and now. You've always had to pay your taxes. We said we would discuss this, and I think that's a compromise route to go. So regardless of what you decide, and like I said, our recommendation is you keep it status quo, look at a credit versus saying adjust our tax rates and reevaluate it that way.
Councilor.
Yeah, I'm all for doing it right. But in the circumstances we have, there's probably a lot of people that paid those taxes already. So I think we're just making a nightmare for our administration. Let them pay them this year. Next year, council goes over it, does the changes, and if there's, decide to lower it, then they can adjust it on next year's taxes. But doing it midstream like this is, I think is gonna be an administration nightmare.
Councilor Dean.
Through the chair to our CEO. So can you just clarify that adjustment on the back end? So are you saying in effect that person that last year paid $250, you can use those metrics and that's so let me stop for a sec. So that person that last year would have paid $250 that this year is paying $1,000.
Mm-hmm.
The credit that you're going to apply would be roughly $750.
Through the chair, I'm not going to make any assumptions on the credit, but I will give you, however you want us to do it, we can apply it. If we look at that 59 parcel, if you look at the 59 times 50, right now they're paying $29.50. If you what they would be paying if they paid a straight mill rate, it would be $544. So in my head, if that was how you were to do it, and the goal is to reduce it so they just pay the mill rate, then you could just say that you remove the minimum tax portion and that they're just paying the straight mill, and whatever that difference is, we would transfer it to each individual property rather than giving parcel one the huge credit and saying you're all, in my head, that's what I would suggest. Now, I'm sure John could make a better option, but I definitely don't want us to go out and resend out revised tax notices just with this time of year.
So just to follow up, how do they receive the credit?
It would just be on their account. And so next year, it'll say there was a credit of minus $50 or whatever the number ends up being, and that would cancel out when they get their bill.
Yeah, I think I could accept that approach because that gives us a chance to really have a look at this and you know, it actually will show that we've addressed that issue. And, you know, when I look at the overall numbers that were applied here, yeah, I would have some concerns, but I still think that it was a surprise to some of these guys, and that was not what the intention should, or what we should have done. So, you know, I could accept, you know, once we have that discussion, that it would be a credit.
Just one other thing too is, I've heard you, Councillor Cook, said he's spoken to 3 or 4 people. Councillor Dean's spoken to 1 or 2. I'm sure some of them are the same, but in all reality, you're talking 10 people that represent less than 5% of the properties on this list. So it's a valid concern. Of course, no one wants to pay taxes. I'm sure the ladies at the front have had more complaints about just taxes increasing from assessment than the 2 or 3% of the industry that's there. With me working out of the fort, the anecdotal evidence I've heard people is, yeah, I saw 100% tax increase. It went to $50. And like, I'm not saying that's not a lot of money, but people are willing to accept it, realizing that they do get really awesome services from Woodlands County, whether it be $2,500 for 9,000 acres or $50 for 100 acres. Or 4,000 if it just happened to have a house. It's all over the board, and I think we provide a great service for that. And a 3 or 4% people, in my opinion, is not a reason to shift policy, whether we liked it or not. There's plenty of time now, if the direction is, we have an August Tax and Finance Committee to come up with policy for next year. But I'll be the broken record, I don't think you want to change it this year.
Yeah, just a question through the chair to administration. So when you have one of these leaseholders, and let's say we've got 10 leases.
Yep.
Do they get 10 separate notices?
They would be separate properties, yeah.
So there's 10 separate notices, okay. See, when we were talking about the minimum tax originally, I was thinking that if you had leases of, 3 or 4 or 5 parcels, you're grouping that into one tax notice, and that the $50 was for that tax notice, and that was my understanding at the time. Then when we see it in practice, it's per lease, so that wasn't quite what I had envisioned on the minimum tax end of things. So I think that's the direction that we'd probably end up going if we end up re-evaluating this, but and I understand the administrative concerns right now with trying to send out notices, so I'd be in favor of figuring this out at the August meeting and then having a refund or a credit applied
After that meeting.
after, yeah. Whatever council, that meeting will happen, and then council will have to make a decision from there.
Councilor Home?
This might be unpopular, but I'm gonna make a motion that council does not change the tax policy as it sits and move the crown gazing lease minimum tax to the taxation subcommittee for discussion.
Any questions on the motion? All in favor?
I just have one question. Sorry, when you say not to make a change, through the chair to Councillor Wilhelm.
Yep.
When you say not to make a change, like, you're saying just keep it the same for this year and then make the adjustment possibly next year, depending on what the subcommittee comes up with. Okay.
Councillor Dean?
Just to clarify to the motion, so does the motion allow for the possibility of a credit to be applied after that, the conclusion of that meeting?
Well, it'll be that taxation will be moved to that, or the discussion will be moved to that meeting, so I guess the outcome of that meeting will determine that or not. We can make any motion that we want coming out of that committee, depending on its suggestion to council afterwards.
Okay.
Yeah, so you're saying leave it as it is for now, we'll have a meeting later, and coming out of that meeting could be whatever motion would come up.
Will there be a suggestion from the subcommittee to council to make a decision upon?
Call the question, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, so down to infrastructure services, concrete collection and recycling.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of council. We have received a few inquiries on whether county transfer site will accept recycled concrete or concrete waste. And I believe a few councillors also received similar inquiries from residents. To go back a little bit in history, prior to 2017, the regional landfill used to accept waste concrete from both county and town residents. In 2017, upon the renewal of the environmental approval for the landfill, part of the approval condition is the closure of a level 3 or class 3 cell at the landfill, which you need a class 3 cell to accept waste concrete. With that condition, the landfill authority stopped accepting concrete waste at the regional landfill. From that point on, the town operated out of their public works yard. They continue to accept waste concrete from town residents. And that left county residents have nowhere to haul their concrete waste to. The closest proper site is the secure site in Fox Creek. In our transfer sites, in odd times, we have accepted outside policy small loads of waste concrete. Our current policy, including the previous policy 4301, did not list concrete as one of the material that we will accept at our transfer site. So based on policy, we are not to accept them. As I mentioned, there's odd times we just, out of the goodness of our heart, been accepting some outside the policy. We are not capable of accepting concrete at our transfer site. There's not enough room. We have very limited ability to recycle them to make something of use. The quantity is small to the point that economy scale is just not there. Concrete crushing is very expensive. I priced out about 50,000 tons of concrete to be crushed. The cost is $1 million, and it's not something that we can make it a viable option. I do know City of Edmonton have multiple private industries that has concrete recycling plants, and they sell the concrete, the craft concrete into building roads, and as for stabilization, it's a great material, but you need a really large quantity to make a viable option out of it. In speaking to the town, I understood the town's plan is every 10 to 20 years, they mobilize a concrete crusher to come and crush, and they either sell or use that material for themselves. And that's the town's intent of it. In looking for a solution, I spoke to the town's administration, and tried to encourage them to consider whether there's an option that they can increase the rates and make it a cost recovery rate, so it's paid by the user. Whoever's hauling waste concrete to either the regional landfill or the town's public waste yard, the town will charge, or the town or authority will charge the users a recoverable cost. For example, $700, $1,000 a load, so that the town can once again, on behalf of the authority, accept county residents' waste concrete and still make it a viable option. The town has mentioned to the CEO that they, if they're open to conversations, we want to chipping. Chipping in is one solution to cover some of the operating costs. The other option is to increase your user charge. You pay what you use. I floated my idea of user fee. The town's administration seemed to be receptive to it. We have a authority meeting this afternoon, and I have drafted a letter for the reef or deputy reef to sign, so I can present at the meeting this afternoon. Councillor Presidio also sits on the authority board as well as our reef. Assuming council is amenable to my approach, that's my recommendation to look at restarting the offering of such services to our county residents. I'm open to any questions you may have.
Thank you. Councillor Crescent.
Through the chair, I think we have to do something so residents can get rid of the concrete. Otherwise, we're gonna be picking it out of the ditches, all the dump spots, which is gonna be a lot harder than picking up garbage. And then we don't have any place to take it, so we have to work something out. But it has to be fair with the town, because they are getting this concrete, sure, they're paying to crush it, but they're also getting the product. So they don't have to buy gravel, they have this. So I think we'll leave that in Jeff's hands to see if he can work out something for us, but we have to do something.
Councillor Dean.
Through the chair to Mr. Zhang, is there a cost to bring concrete out to that secure site? Do they accept it for free other than the trucking, or is there a fee that they charge?
So the chair to Councillor Dean, my understanding is they don't recycle, they just landfill there. So there's a high cost. And there's essentially no recoverable cost for selling, so.
Other questions? Anyone like to make a motion? Councillor Crescent.
I'll make a motion that council send a request to the White Court Regional Solid Waste Management Authority to have concrete generated by the county resident accepted on a cost recovery basis.
Any questions on that motion? This the only question would be, would the cost recovery be to the county or to the user that's dropping it off? Just for clarification.
To the chair, in my vision of cost recovery, you charge a fee to whoever bring concrete to the site, and that cost goes into the operator of the site, so that the operator can balance his expenses and revenue. So if the operator is doing that on behalf of the authority, I would expect the authority is the one paying money out for crushing and receiving money in for user fees and selling the material. If the entity being the town, then I would expect the town be the party paying for the expenses, also receiving the revenue. Make it fair.
So if me as a resident came to drop concrete off, there'd be a bill that I would get to dispose of that though, or would the county pay that bill?
To the chair, I imagine the county shall have no involvement in this. That is purely a user, a direct connection between the user and whoever's accepting it.
I figured that, I just want to make sure. Yeah. So any other questions? Call the question, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And nothing for office, so then we'll be going into closed session for the rest of this. Councilor Dean?
Excuse me, mid-apple. I should have brought this up when we adopted the agenda, but I'm wondering if it would make sense to flip-flop 12-4 and 12-5 and put 12-4 at the end.
I think that, yeah, and then we can clear out the room, kinda, is that the intent, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay,
Do we have to do anything official and make that happen?
nope, we can just skip down
Okay.
to that. Okay, we want to make a motion to go into closed session, Councilor Coogan?
I'll make a motion that we move into closed session at 10:46 to address FOIP 17, 19, 23. And
That's all.
Like all of them.
Thank you. Any discussion on that motion? Call the question, all in favor?